angry with us. I'm assuming that he might be angry with us. Anyways, so everybody's been asking me, hey, Mr. Rose, what do you think about that new bill that Trump's got in office? The big, beautiful bill, I think is what he calls it, that's supposed to sign into effect, I believe, on the 4th of July. So I said, well, I don't know too much of the bill. I've been hearing like little bits about it. And there's probably still some things that I don't know about the bill precisely when it comes to, every little nook and cranny and every little, thing about it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I've read the entire bill, but I just read some of the important stuff that it covers. I felt that was pertaining to the importance of needing to understand what it was about. And, well, I guess we'll go over the pros. First and foremost, no taxes on overtime. Now, I don't know how it works in the state of, of every 50 states, or whatever, however many states there are, I tend to forget. But in the state of Texas, over 10 hours, they tax you at 40% for overtime. Anything over 10 hours of overtime is 40% tax. So I guess from the pro side of it would be like, okay, so that means if you're working a lot of overtime, then that means you'll be able to save 40% on that bill. And then it says that anybody making less than 80,000 a year would be also getting some sort of tax deductions, tax breaks. And I said, you know what? That doesn't sound too bad. It says here also about the, if you're making like money on tips, you don't report it or whatever, you're not getting taxed on that. I'm kind of curious how that works, especially if you're making a ton of money. If you happen to work for like, let's say, some restaurant in Beverly Hills or something that makes a lot of money, and let's just say, you gross 100 grand, you don't have to pay anything on that. I mean, I guess in that case, being a waitress or a waiter sort of has its benefits there. I guess if you're a bartender, whatever, you don't have to report your tips. I mean, you're only just going to get taxed on the small end of what you make by the hour. That, I mean, to me, that would sound like a win-win, but you would have to be in a situation where you were at a restaurant that, or some sort of establishment where you were making really good money, because most restaurants are not making that kind of money. Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course, yeah, I agree, actually. Mr. Martinez, they do tax over 10, I think it's over 10 hours of overtime, they tax you 40% of overtime. So they take a lot out, like, they take a lot out of my check. They take about 12 to 1300 out of each check. That's a lot of money, man. And a lot of that's overtime money too. So it would really help, if they could get rid of that overtime tax. Kind of defeats the whole purpose, right? And then if you get over a certain tax bracket, they just, oh my God, they completely just milk the whole thing, man. They take a ton of it out, man. A lot of it out. So I was reading over it, and they were talking about, they make good chunk off of tips. That's what's up, man. There's some pros to this. It also talks about Social Security and you not being taxed on your Social Security. I always thought that you weren't taxed on Social Security. I just thought that senior citizens weren't, were just getting whatever they were getting a month. I didn't know they were getting taxed on that. That's almost a highway crime right there. Considering the fact that, the money that you worked into in retirement that you're supposed to get back, why would you be getting taxed on that? That doesn't make any sense to me, I don't know, but they said that you're not supposed to be getting taxed on senior citizens. What do they call it? The Social Security. So I thought that was pretty cool. I mean, I guess that would help out a lot. So if you're getting $3,100 a month or $2,000 a month, you can keep the whole thing. You don't have to worry about the government taxing you or whatever. And I'm sure there's a couple other things that I missed in that bill. So I'm just going to go based on what I know versus, because I don't want to sit here and comment on stuff I don't know. I just kind of looked over the bill briefly last night. And, there were some positives about the bill. we all know that taxation is theft. We all know that, the taxes have increased and increased, and it never goes on the goods and services that we need, and it always goes on things that we don't need and that we never really asked for them to do. So essentially, it's kind of like stealing. You're kind of like stealing our money if it's going on things that we didn't ask you to put it towards. Essentially, it's theft. Taxation ultimately is theft, because honestly, you're just raising our taxes and it's not going towards anything we've asked you to put it towards. It's essentially you're just stealing our money, basically, at this point. And, it just gets to the point where it's like, okay, what's the point of me working overtime or doing all these things if you're just going to tax me, love me Sunday? You know what I'm saying? And anyways, make a long story much longer, there are a couple of cons of this bill. And I can tell you just off the hand. Well, first and foremost, I heard about Elon Musk leaving early or something like that, a couple days early, and he had some disagreements about the bill, and that he had said that ultimately it's going to add $3.8 trillion to the deficit. So we're currently at 36 right now, so that put us at roughly about under 40. That means Donald Trump single-handedly is going to, $13 trillion came from him. About 14 of that came from Barack Obama, and about 10 trillion came of that from Biden. These three guys alone have contributed to the country's deficit by 90% of it. That's pretty fucking sad, if you ask me. But these three goofballs, well, not in a sense goofballs, but these three guys have pretty much contributed to the deficit. Now, I'm not going to say there's not any pros to their presidency. Like I said, that this bill is sort of it's kind of a wishy-washy. I like, the fact that we're saving ultimately on taxes, but what I do not like is I don't like adding to the deficit, and people say, well, you got to increase taxes to add to the deficit. I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true, because if the taxes that they were taking from us from decades was used towards the deficit, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. So you basically stole our fucking money and put it in hedge funds that either ended up in these politicians' pockets, or you stole that money and sent it off to other places that it had no business being to. So instead of the money going towards the deficit that we owe, it goes on everything else other than what we owe, which makes no logical sense. But basically, you're just stealing our fucking money. That's what it is. It's theft. Doesn't matter what president is, currently in office. Seems like this is what's the new norm, is just stealing our tax dollars. We wouldn't owe $36 trillion if the tax money you were taking was going towards the deficit. We wouldn't have this issue. We wouldn't even have this problem right now. And I guarantee you that deficit would not be that high. And it shouldn't be that high. For it to be almost goddamn $40 trillion by the time Trump signs that deal on July the 4th, the big beautiful bill, there's no way that the deficit should be that high. There's no way, but it is. And, again, that's why I said, we need what's called term limits. I've been saying this for a long time. We need term limits. This is ridiculous. And, we vote these politicians in place because we entrust that our taxes is going to go towards exactly where it should be. And it seems like that they're either negligent, or they're just doing this on purpose, or they're just, or they got some other political favors or whatever, kickbacks, whatever it is. It shouldn't be like this. We shouldn't be this far into debt. And Elon Musk, I'm not saying that, he is the savior or whatever, but I'm not saying he's perfect, but he was right about the bill, that it's going to add $4 trillion to the deficit. This is, it's sort of like, on one hand, we're saving on taxes. That's great. But on the other hand, that, we're adding to the deficit. I was listening to Miss Hidalgo the other day. One of our representatives here in Houston was like, oh, well, if we don't increase taxes, then or decrease the spending budget, then we're going to be in a crisis. I'm like, well, again, if you guys weren't stealing our money in the first place, we wouldn't have been in this position. If the money that y'all were taking from us from increased taxes the last 5 years went on the deficit, we wouldn't have had this fucking problem. Oh no, yeah, this fucking problem. I mean, seriously. So, and with the increased taxes, is it going to cover the deficit, or is it just covering the interest rates on the taxes on the deficit that we owe? So then we're never really out of debt. The debt just keeps going and going, and it's just like a slow bleeding process. You know, you cut an artery and all that blood just spews out, and then it just, you put the Band-Aid back on, and it's a continuance of a problem. It just never ends. It's just the song that never ends. It just keeps going and going. You're just slowly bleeding out. That's what I'm saying. I'm telling you, man. I would put it like this. There's pros and cons to this bill. I like the opportunity on saving, but I'll tell you what's missing in this bill. And I think it's kind of common sense, is we need to eliminate property taxes, and we need to go ahead and get rid of the state tax, and we need to go ahead and get rid of the income tax and impose the flat tax of 8% to where everybody pays the 8% tax. And you wouldn't have to have the property tax, you wouldn't have to have the sales tax, you wouldn't have to have the state tax or the income tax. You wouldn't have to have none of that. You can get rid of all that right now and impose the 8% flat tax that Rand Paul proposed, and we wouldn't be in this mess right now. But as long as we got property taxes, that is the biggest fucking scam I've ever heard of in my life, to have a property tax on a property that you never fucking own, because the government come either eminent domain and take the fucking house, or you don't pay your property taxes 3 years and they just take the fucking house from you, even if the damn thing's paid off. You don't own anything. And it's just like, that doesn't make any sense to me, to sit here and tell me, oh, well, you own your house, the deed's in your name, but they could just steal it, and just either they can eminent domain, or they could just say, oh, well, you didn't pay your property taxes 3 years. Oh, well, the property's ours now, sorry. And they just auction your house off to whoever pays the taxes, and the bill gets passed to the next person, and it's probably just, another case of just stealing from people who are probably either retired or probably either ran in hard times. So you take their houses, and you know who does this shit? Corporations and billionaires who invest in real estate. Mostly, not all, but most of them are playing the loopholes that are currently in real estate, that are allowing corporations to steal your home. And this is what they're doing. That's why I said we need to start putting a rule under that LLC. We need to go ahead and limit them out to the amount of units and condos they can buy, and we need to take corporations out of the real estate market. This is another scam that's going on. Another scam. And so now they're just stealing homes from people when they could just build a condo, a high-rising condo, a big giant house right next to a retirement subdivision, and that's how they push them out, because the property taxes just go up based on the property value. So they just go up, and then you just push these people out, and then who comes and buys it? These corporations come and buy these subdivisions. That's what they're doing. In fact, the people have just had their nose up in the air about it, and they're not addressing it, is even the hardest part. It's like we kind of know this is going on, but we just sit there. We just sit there collectively. It's just crazy. And it's we're just literally just seeing like the top less than 1% just stealing everything, and it's just what's happening right now. And the fact that nobody's talking about it is even crazier. That nobody's raising awareness or anything on this, and this is just continuing to see its ugly head fester and fester and fester and fester. Like I said, get rid of property taxes. That stops corporations from stealing your home. You don't have to worry about your grandparents losing their home. They're retired. You don't have to worry about them having to go back to work at fucking 86 because, some fucking company is trying to steal their home. And this is what can happen. They just get rid of the property tax. This will stop this. They'll put it into this shit. The fact that it's 2025 and there's still no bill that talks or discusses about property taxes makes me wonder what the fuck is going on. Let's get rid of the state taxes, like in California, like in Florida, New York, other places that I haven't mentioned. Let's go ahead and get rid of that as well. And then we can just go ahead and get rid of the income tax as well, because the income tax is also another scam on top of the other two. But the property tax, in my opinion, is probably the worst, one of them all, because it's basically saying that you own a fucking house, but you don't own it, just don't pay for the property tax for 3 years. And you could it's just stripped away. Just take the damn thing from under you. That's what I'm saying. In Trump's bill, it should have said elimination of property taxes. That should have been the first thing on top of that goddamn bill. And that's the thing that irks me, because I feel the overtime, not a lot of companies pay overtime. Not too many of them. Certain sectors, most jobs don't. They barely want to give you the 40, let alone the overtime. So it's sort of a wishy-washy, debate on the overtime pay. Then you want to talk about, well, let's go ahead and eliminate anybody making under 80. Okay, well, that's fine. But if you're going to increase somebody's property taxes every year and they're continuing to go up, and the companies are not giving out a lot of hours for you to work to sustain that property, then you still feel like you're going to lose the house. I just feel like it's just that, we should be addressing these things. I don't know why Rand Paul's the only politician to ever bring up property taxes. Elimination of it. I would have figured that you'd be hearing this from Democratic politicians, or possibly even some of the other neighboring Republican. You're not hearing that from him. He's the only candidate that's raised the issue on property taxes. The only one, to my knowledge. Yeah, I agree, Matthew the King. Income tax is the only progressive tax. Yeah, I agree. College student, I work at HEB. Elderly people work for. That's what's up, man. It can maintain. Well, it depends on where you live. It depends on where you live. Like I said, we could get out of this debt if these politicians weren't stealing our money in the first place and applying it to based on the debt that we owed. If they weren't stealing this money and sending it to other places instead of here, we wouldn't be in this position right now. We wouldn't be in this position. This comes from probably 50 years of them stealing our money. And that's just what's accounted for. That's what's unaccounted for. That's why I proposed term limits that should have been on the ballot, that should be on the ballots coming up. Term limits. I say we should hold every government position from Congress all the way to all the three legislative branches, to governor, to every political position in the government. Let's go ahead and impose that, that term limit. Of course, they don't want to do that, because then that means, oh God, I'm only going to be in office for 8 fucking years. And then another thing, I want to comment on is the cutting of the SNAP or the cutting of, what was it? It was SNAP benefits, and there was another one that they wanted to cut, Medicaid. Now, am I not going to sit here and say, okay, there's not fraud going on in Medicaid or fraud going on in SNAP? No, I'm not going to sit here and say there's probably not some fraud. Maybe a couple cases here or there, or maybe a little bit more than a couple cases. I'm not going to give you a number because I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and say it wouldn't surprise me if there was a little bit of fraud here or there. Nothing's perfect, right? But at the same time, if you're just going to wipe it all away, what about people that really need it? It's just it's sort of a double-bladed sword topic. And then, so if that is the case and the issue is about SNAP benefits and Medicaid, the fraudulent things going on in there, then why don't we talk about corporate welfare? Why is that never addressed? When we reward banks all the time and bail them out, when we reward large corporations and bail them out all the time, why don't we ever talk about corporate welfare as a situation? Why don't we ever discuss that? Are we ever going to discuss that? No, because of course we can't talk about the corporate side and the welfare that goes on when they have their sticky little hands out to the government asking for a bailout. We've seen that before multiple times. But nobody will ever discuss, will ever question corporations and people on the rich sector of stealing money from the government. That no one will ever discuss that, ever bring that up. So I always say, if you're going to bring up SNAP benefits, then let's talk about the whole goddamn thing. Not just cherry pick this and this. No, you're going to address the whole fucking thing. That's why I get a little frustrated about that debate when they say, well, people on the food stamps be stealing. I'm like, yeah, large corporations be stealing money from the banks, and the banks are in on it, but you don't say anything about that. Why don't we talk? And they steal millions, by the way. Millions. You don't say nothing about that. And that's why I say, if we're going to address the whole goddamn thing, you address the whole goddamn thing from the start. It's frustrating. But anyways, yeah, I don't do these videos too often because, you know, people tend to feel a certain type of way. And I know sometimes I can rub people off the wrong way. So it's about wording in this video. So, you know, I'm going to try to work on my wording and how I word things from now on, if I'm going to go back to these videos. Because I used to never have a filter, so I used to say a lot of things. And yeah, you know, so you got to be a little careful. The times we live in. So sometimes you have to be a little bit careful on the wording, if that makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to work on that. It takes time. Like anything, it takes time. So again, there's pros to this bill. There's definitely some cons to this bill, and there's some things that are missing out of this bill. Sort of a mixture of the three. Like again, if they say, hey, let's eliminate property taxes, let's go ahead and get rid of the state income tax, and let's go ahead and get rid of state taxes, then I think that would definitely be an eye opener, and would be like, okay, well, I can kind of see more pros to this bill. Like on a large sector, you know, again, you know, I mean, corporate welfare is something that nobody talks about. They don't talk about how the super rich steal from the government. They will never ever talk about it, but they'll talk about somebody stealing food stamps all day. I'm like, that is a minuscule problem to the millions of dollars that they steal from the government all the time with bailouts and, you know, do me this favor, I'll pay this politician off to do this. And that's totally fine because they're rich and powerful, they can do that. But no one will bring it up because how dare you question them, you know? And that's sort of where it's at. But if somebody on the poor sector is doing it, I'm not saying it's right, but I'm just saying that if you're going to address the damn thing, you address the whole thing. Not just cherry pick one thing. You address the whole goddamn thing. And yes, it is raining today. What else did I want to say? What else was I going to say? Did I forget something? Hey, the American flag. We were waiting for July 4th. Light some fireworks. Oh, absolutely, Marvin. I'll be in Dallas, baby. So I'll be in Dallas for about 4 or 5 days. Now I might travel up to Oklahoma. I might be up there for about 5 or 6 days. Oh, my little vacay, baby. Anyways, it's raining like a motherfucker out here, as you can see. Raining like a motherfucker. You call it money crimes. I like that. I like that. Hey, somebody's got a dog or cat in their photo. I like dogs. I'm a cat and a dog person, goddammit. And I'm a people person. A little bit of all the three. Okay, so I talked about Trump's bill, the pros and cons, stuff added to it. You know, it's just kind of like one of these controversial bills that is not going to satisfy everyone. If you're working a shitload of overtime, I mean, I guess that this bill would be okay. You know, it'd be all right. As long as you're not paying anything off the back end. Because sometimes there's always a catch. It's like, oh, well, we'll just tax you at the end of the year. And it's like, oh, great, you know. Well, why don't you just steal it from me now instead of stealing it from me later before I spend the goddamn thing? Why don't you just go ahead and steal it now and get it over with? You know? Don't make me pay it later. Just steal it now. Because if not, I'm going to spend it. You know, that's just, it's just human nature, baby. Human nature, you know. You're gonna spend it. Yeah, a lot of spending there, baby. A lot of spending. Well, anyways, yeah, I told everyone this. I said, Rand Paul should be the president. That's just my personal opinion. I gave a million reasons why he should be the president. But no, it's not about fixing anything really. It's about who's more well liked. That's all it is. Donald Trump is more well-liked, so he's going to get the vote. It doesn't really matter if he does it or not. He's just a well-liked guy or whatever. But me, I'm past the well-liked guys, and I'm more past of what candidate's most likely going to get the job done. Rand Paul's that guy. He would have done it. He would have done it. If he was the president right now, we wouldn't have property taxes. But nope. We have to get Donald Trump in, who's more concerned about the, his corporate real estate investors and his billionaire friends. He doesn't give a shit about the common person that voted him in. Like when I voted him in twice. Like, his bills don't benefit me really, but it benefits his billionaire buddies. That's why I just said, well, then maybe my vote shouldn't go towards him anymore. It should go to somebody else in the party. And Rand Paul's that guy. I think he represents, and I think he touches base with the elimination of property taxes, with the reform the tax code here in the United States, but he just didn't have the popularity base behind him. And so a lot of people just said, I don't want to vote for him. He's not a white guy. He's not popular. He's not cool. He's not on that 3-second TikTok clips. And so, of course, in this country, it's about who's the most well-liked. Look at our celebrities. Look at the people that sort of have the most popularity. They're not really the most well-educated people. They're just entertainers. And maybe, to a degree, we as humans are sort of a glutton for our own punishment. Maybe we sort of deserve what's going on. Maybe we are somewhat responsible for all this. Maybe we need to reprogram our minds as to what we find valuable and what we find entertaining. And think about how that sounds. Think about it. That's a hard thing to think of because humans are naturally bored with complacency. We're naturally bored with the answer, but we're more curious about the question and more curious about the people who are most liked, and it's usually the people that are the most troublemakers. And maybe we need to reboot our minds as to how we process in this country what's valuable, what's not, who we look up to. I mean, think about it, it kind of makes sense. It's a rebooting of the system as what we find entertaining. Right? What we find is entertainment. Look at our social media platform. It's filled up with a ton of this bullshit. Maybe we should reprogram our minds as to what we find as entertainment value, what we find as shock value. Sometimes maybe the most boring person in the room may have the most knowledge. Maybe Rand Paul's that guy. I know he's not popular. I know he's not the 3-second TikTok clip guy, but if he's willing to eliminate property taxes, well, not fucking vote him in. It just makes sense to me. I guess, in this country, nothing really does make sense anymore. Maybe I'm in the wrong. I don't know. Maybe I need to reboot my brain. I don't know. Maybe it's the rain. Maybe it's the weather today. I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take for our country to turn around. But I can tell you this right now. It's not, see, people think, oh, well, if you just make more money, then it'll be fine. And it's like, well, not necessarily true. If the dollar's already collapsing, as you can see, and businesses are closing up, and we're not going to have access to food or water because most of the businesses are closed, and then most of the corporations that are going to own most of the products are going to just hike the fucking prices up and therefore just continue to crush that dollar some more. We're in trouble. We're in some serious trouble. Serious trouble. I think it's time we need to get educated on these things. We need to reboot our minds as to what we find as entertainment value in this country, and start asking questions, about why things are the way they are. Because I can tell you this right now, Democrat or Republican in this video, it doesn't really matter anymore. This country cannot sustain itself in the direction it's going down to. Let me repeat that. This country is not going to be able to sustain itself in the direction it's going in. It's going to be bad. It can't. There's no way. Like I said, this next election, there better be fucking term limits on that motherfucker, and there better be some tax reform, because I'm telling you right now, this country cannot sustain itself in the direction it's headed down. No matter what people say, oh, we just got to make more money and learn a trade skill, get involved in real estate, blah blah blah. If everything keeps going up and the cost of living continues to rise and the dollar continues to be worthless, then you're going to continue to have this problem no matter if you ask for higher wages. As long as the taxes are going up, then we're going to have problems. Just a minimum wage at 30 is no different than a minimum wage of 3. The difference is the number. Money's just a transfer of energy. It has no value. That's all it is. It's worthless. The dollar itself is worthless now. It means nothing. In fact, I would say back in the early 2000s, $5 was a lot more worth than $100 today. $100 today ain't worth shit compared to what it was in the early 2000s, or maybe even before that. We're in some serious trouble here, and it's time that we need to start having these conversations, man, of what's going on. You know, I look online and all I hear people doing is talking about their sex life and, oh, I can't get a girlfriend and I can't get a boyfriend and I'm looking for a rich guy and this and all. It's all distractions. It's all bullshit. Don't you see the economy's collapsing? Don't you see that? It's right before your eyes. Even the basic things that you could do back then for a cheap price, you can't even do now. I mean, think about that. It's scary, isn't it? It's scary, isn't it? This is the thought of that. It's scary. You know? I went to the movie theater a while back, about a year ago. I was working in security at the time. And we went to go watch one of these Marvel movies that were out. I forgot what movie it was, but me and my buddy were in line. I saw this young couple in front of me. And they had bought some tickets to see the movie. And each one of them had $20, but they had nothing else after that. You know, remember when you had that $10, you can get that ticket and go in there and watch that movie? You can't do that shit no more, man. Just the basic things in life now is going to be almost impossible to do. And that's going to destroy the social environment that we naturally as humans have. You know, the idea that you can buy a home, have it paid off, and then never own the motherfucker makes absolutely 0 sense to me. It makes 0 sense. The only people that are fighting against property taxes, unfortunately, is far left and far right on both sides of the party, because they want corporations to be able to take your property, and they want to be able to have some kickbacks on it. They want to be able to steal your home. You know? Let's say, oh, you should never retire. You should work till the day you die. Blah, blah, but it's all bullshit, dude. You should work till the day you fall off. I don't care if you're in a wheelchair, you better get back to fucking work. It's like, dude, it's like, how are you going to expect somebody that's 90, 100 years old to still work? I mean, if they want to work, that's great, but it's like, shouldn't they be able to enjoy the rest of their life without you having to steal their shit? It's like, Jesus fucking Christ, how low do humans have to go? Like, how low does it go? Well, I appreciate it. To whoever's comment saying this dude's spitting facts. Absolutely. That's what I said. This Trump bill has some pros. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't. But the cons outweigh the pros. And unfortunately, without a property tax relief on there, or the deletion of property taxes, that bill ain't worth shit. And that's just me personally. Because it's basically saying we're going to relieve your taxes on one side while increasing your taxes on the other side. And therefore, it's either way, it's our loophole to take your house. Your house is your most valuable possession you have, even though they say, well, you just shouldn't own a house, but you should rent. And the reason why they say that, because they want to own the fucking rights to the house so that you become a renter. And that's basically like when you hear guys like Cardone and all those guys, those idiots on YouTube talking about that shit about, oh, you should never buy a home, you should rent. You know why? Because the fucker wants to own all the condos and units. So that way he has the right to that property and he can steal it from you whenever he wants. And he don't pay goddamn property taxes on that shit because he's making cash flow off of the capital gains. So he don't have to worry about fucking ever having to pay taxes on it. And meanwhile, his renters are the ones suffering. So basically, we're getting to a point to where owning a home is going to be almost fucking impossible unless we address the issue. And I'd say the only way to really address it is just to go ahead and eliminate those property taxes, and you never have to worry about this shit. It will never fucking happen. And you could tell guys like Grant Cardone to shove it up his ass. He ain't never going to steal your home. Because that's the point where they say, well, you should never own a home. It loses value. over, but yet when these guys are buying up property, they're not saying that shit. When they got properties of massive subdivisions, neighborhoods, that they own the fucking property, are they fucking telling you that they're not fucking owners? Bull, they fucking own the whole goddamn subdivision. What the fuck do you mean they don't own a fucking house? They own the whole goddamn subdivision. And then they're sitting here telling you not to own a fucking house, but these fuckers own fucking subdivisions. It's crazy. It's insane. It's ludicrous. Not Ludacris the rapper, but literally Ludacris itself. Still working, yeah. Appreciate it. I agree. I agree with you 100%. Hey, I agree. Appreciate it. Coffee, what's up? The dollar is lessened. Gold now. Gold goes up. That's trouble in the world. Absolutely. I appreciate you guys commenting. I appreciate you guys going back and forth in the comment section. This is definitely... I didn't mean for this video to get the way it was. It just, usually I get 5 or 6 viewers a video. But whenever you see Trump in the title, that's where my views come. Or let's say I put, something controversial. That's usually where my money's at. And I don't make money off these videos, but that's just where the views tend to go up, because that's when I get into this mode, this rant, and I tend to drive around and talk for an hour until I can't say anything more about it, and then the video just ends, and then it's another day again. Again, it's just this is the only country I can think of. I mean, even third world countries, you can buy a property and never fucking pay a property tax. And if they do, they pay next to nothing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say they're perfect, but how the fuck do they got a system set up in place where again, they have a property tax they don't have to worry about paying, or it's next to nothing in a third world country, but yet in this country right here, they seem to never get it right. And in fact, they'll increase the property tax before they even address the issue. Make no goddamn sense. Like I said, we're in a lot of trouble, man, if we don't start addressing this shit. I think past this election, because I've pretty much given up on this administration. So I will say by the next one, by 2028, it's going to be down to, when people are going to be asking those stupid ass questions in the seat and over there, will say, well, you want to ask the politician a question here, and then they'll ask a stupid ass question that makes exactly no sense. The only question you should be asking is, when are we eliminating property taxes, and when are we going to have tax reform in this country? Actually, legitimate tax reform. And that should be the first question that should come out of anybody's mouth when the microphone hits and it's time to start asking away. These are the questions that should be coming up, that we should be discussing. Well, maybe I can do that. Maybe I could just make videos instead of... Yeah, Grant Cardone is corny as fuck. He just wants to own all the property. It's just funny how all these fucking guys in real estate, especially the guys that own like all these condos and all that shit, they'll sit here and tell you should never buy anything. It's just, why they're saying that? Because they want to buy up as much property as they can so they can have the rights to it. They can, increase the rent. They can throw out whoever they want, and they can just bring in whoever they want that's willing to pay the higher bidder cost. So that's why they're tricking the masses by saying, don't buy a home. It's not worth anything and it devalues over time. But what they're not failing to say is that they own subdivisions, neighborhoods, thousands of acres of homes, and they're sitting here telling you don't worry about ever buying a home. What the fuck kind of shit is that? It's just an easier way for them to trick you into taking more property. It's just, that's all it is. It's just a scheme. But like I said, maybe we're aware of this tidal wave coming and we're just kind of prepared. If you look at the way businesses are today, it's almost a joke. The way businesses are conducted now, they increase the cost on the product. The quality of the product continuously goes down. Even in the real estate, you're starting to see these new homes they're building are all like older products, cheap products, and then they just hawk up the cost, and then all these problems are happening. And it's the same thing when you're buying electronics, when you're buying all types of newer products, even food, and you notice that it tastes really horrible. It's just low quality, but then they just hike it up and they just tell you this is capitalism. I'm like, well, that's funny, because 20, 30 years ago, this is not what capitalism was. You know, it was all about producing the best product, and you beat your opponent out by that. Now it's just, you know, how much can I steal and minimize and cut corners at all means cost to try to conduct business. And that's the ugly side of what business has become. Business is not what it used to be. It's an ugly, dark world now. It's just about stealing. That's all it really is. It's not really about exchange of goods and services, you know? You always heard that old saying, and it's like, maybe it used to be that way. The old American way was to say, you know, that was the old way. You know, it was all about, you know, producing, you know, goods and services and products. You know, now it's all about low products up the cost, low quality products, third party vendor, up the low quality products, up the cost. You know, a lot of the new stuff you're buying is just old products they put together and just say, oh, yep, here's a new car, and all the parts on it are old. Like, if you notice, they always have a lot of recalls on a lot of these newer vehicles. Like, notice they always, every like 4 months, like, there's a recall and this, there's a recall and that, because it was some bullshit fucking product they put in there, and it went out. So then they just replace it with another refurbished bullshit product. You're not really getting anything new nowadays. It's really hard trusting businesses now. There's almost sort of a trust wedge now. You know, having to trust. It's almost like we have to build our own shit now. I have to build my own car, and I have to build, you know, plant my own products. I have to, you know, raise my own crops, make my own food, because it's hard trusting businesses now. There's going to be this, and it's going to continue to get worse, if not even much worse than that. It's going to continue to wrap itself around the head. And this is the best way that I think this is the best explanation for all this shit. In my personal opinion, I think a lot of these corporations and stuff, I think people know that the economy is going to collapse. I think they're already past the point of, is it? I think it's okay, when is it going to happen? Because we already see it around us. Businesses are closing up. Products continue to go up while the quality and service goes down. You know, all these questions are going to ask, you know, we can't find workers, blah, 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 blah. So you tell yourself, okay, I know this is going to collapse. The question is when, right? Because that's really the question at this point. It's not if it's going to collapse, it's when, right? So everybody kind of knows this, and they're like, okay, why should I have to provide a good service or valuable service if I know for a fact it's just going to collapse anyway? It's sort of like when they say, well, people don't want to work nowadays. They don't want to work anymore. Well, it's not that they don't want to work. It's just the fact, what's the point of fucking working when there's no incentive to work, when the fucking dollar's going to collapse anyway? What's the fucking point? You know, excuse my French, excuse my cursing, but what's the fucking point? Why am I going to work for a collapsing fucking dollar? I mean, ask most people that. And that's just the truth. Why am I going to work for a dollar that's going to fucking collapse anyway? What's the fucking point? You know what I'm saying? So I think when you look at that, and I'm not encouraging anyone to be lazy or not have a job. I'm not encouraging it. I'm just saying, from the mindset standpoint, the economy is going to fucking collapse. What's the fucking point of working? So you look at it like that, it kind of makes sense. And it's kind of like, I don't really blame any of these people for not wanting to work, or I don't really blame them for not wanting to work for a minimum wage job. I don't really blame them. I've worked tons of minimum wages jobs. I'm not going to sit here and say I don't. I've worked for some pretty damn good jobs that pay pretty good money. And I've worked in the foundation business where I made thousands on just selling a job. And I've been there, I've done that. I've kind of had a trick of the trades of both sides of the plate. And I'm not a millionaire or nothing like that, of course. But, I've sort of seen the benefits of making a decent amount of money off of a trade skill versus the minimum wage. And I don't blame people for not wanting to start off at $10, $11, $12 an hour. That whole death of the minimum wage job, that shit's over. I think people are past it now. I think it's like, it would be different if, let's say, the economy was booming and the prices were kind of low and the taxes were low and we had tax reform, which that's why I said it would be perfect to eliminate property taxes, the state tax, and the income tax, so the average American can save more money and it brings strength to that dollar, rather than continue to increase taxes while the cost in goods and services continue to go up and the quality goes down. So when people are looking at it, they're like, okay, so what's the point of me working for $12 an hour if all these bad things are happening? There's really no point. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, it's going to become a question now. What's the point of working for $1 when just everything's just going to go down anyway? Right? If everything's just going to go down anyway, what's the fucking point? And I don't blame people for not wanting to work for $1. It seems like to me working for gold or silver seems like a better fucking option at this point than working for an actual dollar. The actual meaning of the dollar, the American dollar in your pocket. You know, and people don't look at those kind of things. I think about this shit often, but I just don't talk about it as much anymore because it ruffles feathers of people, and people get upset because of course, this is everybody's life, and everybody has their way of living and doing their own thing. And this is the reality of the question we should be talking about. Like I said, I voted Trump in twice, so I'd be a hypocrite. I told you that I didn't. I did. I voted him in both times, but I didn't vote the last election because, again, my guy's Rand Paul, so I didn't vote in this previous election. But I will say, like I said, I'm not blaming Trump for all this. I'm just saying that he had his part in it. And that's what I'm saying. I think this goes beyond Republican, Democrat. I think this goes on beyond how you're looking at the economy, what direction the economy is going in, how's the business sector doing? It's doing terrible. How's the dollar doing? It's doing terrible. Where are taxes going to places it shouldn't be going to? And you start to look at all these things and you're like, okay, so it looks like to me the dollar's collapsing. It's going to collapse. When is this going to happen and what's going to happen now? What I believe is truly going on is that the mentality of people is what? When you're in a crisis, you get scared. And when you get scared, you go in survival mode. When you get in survival mode, what do? You hoard, right? So that means you're going to hoard money. And if you're in the business or you're in the private sector or the individual, your mentality is to hoard, right? You're going to hoard money. So if that is the case, you're going to hoard money, then what's going to end up happening is slow growth, right? So you're going to see it on all ends of the sector. Rather, corporations are moving our jobs out, not wanting to pay a penny to the dollar. You got people that, here are struggling, whatever the case is. And so they just figure, okay, this economy is going to collapse. Why don't I accumulate as much money as I can? So that way, when it does collapse, beautiful house, by the way, beautiful homes out here. This is a beautiful subdivision, by the way, over here. You got to have some flata to live out here. But this is some damn good houses out there. And you got the water out there too. Boy, if I won $1 million, I'd live out here. If I was a millionaire. Well, I'm not, unfortunately. But, I would definitely live in a house like that, man. It's beautiful out here. Beautiful homes out here. But that's besides the point. The point is that they're going to hoard up as much money as they can so that when this thing collapses, they're hoping I'll survive. Rather, it's either Bitcoin you hear about. I hear a lot about that shit. I hear about a lot of pros and cons of Bitcoin. I don't really know if I trust it necessarily. It's not FDIC approved. You could lose your money in it. So some people got rich off of it. It's one of those iffy things. And then of course you got people that talk about digital currency. They got all this digital currency that's out, and people are talking about that, and there's that notion as well. And so they're figuring, okay, well, let's just go ahead and accumulate as much wealth as we can until this thing collapses. And when it does, I'm just going to transfer it to digital currency, and who's ever not on board, they're going to be screwed. And that's my best way to sum up what is going on now. That's the best way, is to sum it up. Is that everyone's mindset is, let me just accumulate as much money as I can so that when this thing collapses, because it will, I'm good. It's sort of a survival mode. Because, humans, at the end of the day, you're going to think about yourself when times are like this. Of course, you're going to think about your family and stuff, but when it's a battle royal, the Royal Rumble, you're going to tend to think about your own interest. You're going to think about your own interests. And it's a sad moment in life, but we're down to that survival moment. Every man for himself, the last man standing. It's like the battle royal in WWE. That Royal Rumble, and everybody's in the ring, and then you're friends with this person, and then when it's down to the final, then you're not friends with him because you got to eliminate him because you want to be the last person. It's sort of like that, or it's sort of like there's a bunch of gold inside of a treasure chest, and they said, hey, the year's 1940, or let's just say 45, postpartum World War II, and it's like, hey, you work for 30 years at this job, you'll have a house, you'll have a picket fence, you'll have your retirement, and the cost of living will be cheap, so you'll be okay. Have a family, 2 kids, 2.3 kids, whatever the case is, right? Then, after the fact, you can retire, right? Now, it used to be the good old American way, and companies looked out for their employees. Now, it's completely changed. Companies don't give a shit about their employees anymore. It doesn't matter how good you are. You can be the best employee. They don't give a rat's flying ass about you. And the minute that they'll find somebody else to replace you, if it's not that, it'll be a robot, they'll do it. And they don't give a rat's ass. Yeah, I had an employee the other day. He said, I've worked here for this company for a year and a half, and I've never, ever called in. And I'm like, congratulations, you'll be replaced by a robot in 2 weeks. They don't give a flying fuck about that, boy. He kind of looked at me. And that's the truth, because I used to do that bullshit. I used to do that shit when I was at Walmart. I went 3 years without calling in or missing a day. I don't give a rat's ass. I'm here for a year and a half, and I've never, ever, ever, ever in my life called in. And I was like, yeah, and you'll be replaced by a robot in 2 weeks. They don't care, dude. They don't care. It's okay, you're on your high horse because you're on that 0 day fucking, never missed a day thing or whatever. You won't even make the news. And you know what? It's kind of sad because a guy like you is very, very, very uncommon. That's loyal. Now, if you was in 1955 and you said, I've never, ever in my life, ever missed a day of work, that might hold some merit. Because you might actually get some promotions back then. And then you'll get some company acknowledgement. Nowadays, they don't give a flying fuck. You'll be like, now in 2025, I've never, ever missed a day. Oh, congratulations, you're fired. Get the fuck out of here. That's what they'll tell you. You'll be all like doing the, you'll be all doing that dance or the wave or whatever. And I've never missed a day. And then they're like, good. Get your shit, get out, you're fired. I'm just being honest. That's the reality of where it's at. I mean, I'm just being honest. I'm just being honest. This is just the truth. They say, congratulations, you're fired. Get the fuck out of here. And they add insult to injury. They'll hire somebody with your name just to fucking troll you. They'll hire somebody with your name, or they'll have a robot there, which that's probably what's going to happen next, with your name on it. Just to add insult to injury. Just to add insult to injury. And it's sad, it's pretty pathetic, but that's kind of where we're at. It's I think human greed ultimately destroyed us. I think it destroyed humanity. Absolutely. It's pretty pathetic. But it is what it is. And so a lot of people tell me, well, and this is the story that I hear all the time, is they're like, well, there's no, no one wants to work, and, and that should be a job for high schoolers. I'm like, oh, yeah, I agree, but not even high schoolers want those jobs, so they're just going to close up. So it's going to screw all of us. Now, I'm not a guy to say raise the wages. What I say is we should lower the taxes so that we shouldn't always have to ask for a higher wage. That's my argument. I say let's address the root cause of the problem is the taxes. That's the root cause of the problem. It's not the wage. Everybody thinks, well, you got to raise the wage to $45 an hour to equate to today's cost of living. No, absolutely not. What we should do is lower the taxes. Therefore, the minimum wage doesn't have to be necessarily $45 an hour. It could be $22. Something like that. If you told me, hey, listen, would you rather have a $50 bill or $100 bill? Well, the first answer would be to most people is I'd rather have the $100 bill. Kind of makes sense, right? We all want money, right? So $100 is greater than 50, but by mathematics, you're correct. But if you told me that $50 would cover more than the $100 bill, which one would you rather have? Well, I'd rather have the $50. If $50 could get more groceries, more in my bag, then I'm going to go with the $50. But most people would say, well, just give me the 100 because 100 is greater than 50. So therefore I want the 100. Just give me the $100. I'll take the 100. And yeah. There you go. So even though the cost of living continues to rise, people's answer is just raise the wages. My thing is, how about we lower the taxes? Therefore, we shouldn't always have to come to the bargaining table for higher wages. Therefore, your dollar has more strength, because raising taxes and raising wages are both equally just as bad. The real solution is, let's lower the taxes so it eases the dollar, it stretches more, and therefore we can have more to buy. Therefore, every other day we're not saying, hey, because the property tax is going up or this is going up, let's ask for higher wages. Maybe you won't ask for it as much, because then therefore the taxes will be lower, then the dollar will have strength to it. So to me, I would rather have less. I would rather, if they say, Rose, would you take a $4 pay cut if we would eliminate property taxes? You goddamn right I would, because that in the long run would help out a lot better than what it would just be as, oh, well, just give me the $34 an hour. I'd rather take $30 an hour and cut it down to property tax relief and say, okay, well, I'd sacrifice one end, but then I'd be gaining on the other a lot more. It'd be a lot more. Now it's time to read some comments. Well, it would defeat their death purposes. I'm glad somebody brought that up. Damn, I have a lot of comments in here. You must be in Houston. It's raining in Sugar Land and up here off 99. Hey, somebody's right around my block. It's $25.75 an hour. More population, more scams, more advantage taken. It's population. Maybe that is greed and power. It's an awful thing. Man, the business side, I'm going to be honest with you guys. The business side is an ugly world. It's not what it used to be. About respecting your competitors, about, having a good product. Now it's just about a cutthroat, and it's an ugly place. You got people underbidding you. You got people trying to steal jobs from you. You got the city trying to fucking take you out. You got other corporations, the bigger bank eats smaller bank, that sort of ordeal. You got a lot of these, then you got to deal with insurance adjusters, contractors, customers, other competitors trying to take you out, then somebody within your own company stealing your knowledge and they're trying to open up their own business. Dude, it's a doggy dog world, and they don't give a fuck if you fall flat on your ass. That's the ugly truth about business, bro. Is that at the end of the day, no one gives a shit about you. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. The honesty's out there. That's fine. It's no worries. No big deal. I'm kind of fully aware of that now. It's just, I guess now we're in the survival mode. It's like, it's every man for himself now. And it's just the last man standing in the middle of the ring wins and owns all the riches. It's like, is that where a society we're headed towards? Because if it's not, then explain to me what's going on. Because that to me seems like the most logical explanation out of all this is what we're headed to. We are headed to a survival. It's the last man left standing. So is one person going to be left on the world and just own all the riches? Is this what we're headed towards? The death of human, or the death of civilization? I mean, where exactly we're going with this? It's that's the ugly side of the truth of the dark world that we're in now. It's an ugly side, man, and it's yeah, I think so. About bringing everyone down to zero. It's yeah, it's an ugly side, man. It's an ugly, dark path. Personally, I don't agree with all this. I don't. But I also understand this is what's going on. I'm not the kind of person to dwell and say, well, no one cares about me, so poor me. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm still going to go and do my own thing. It's just me. I've come to realize that now. You know what I'm saying? And it's better that for you guys watching this video so I understand that. Because in the business sector, nobody gives a shit about you. It doesn't matter your perfect attendance. I'm the best employee ever, blah, blah, blah. None of that matters anymore. It's just the reality of it. It's not to be mean. It's not to be a dick. It's just the reality of it. Just no one really cares. Whatever, doesn't matter. You just got to do your. It shouldn't stop you from your mission. You know what I'm saying, in life, to do your own thing. There's still the self responsibility part. You gotta, you just gotta go out and do your own thing. Now I think if anything, it sort of puts you on your mission a little more. So it's sort of like, damn, well, I'm fully aware of this. Let me focus more on myself instead of, I mean, you can still do nice things for people, sure, but you just say, let me focus on me before I worry about anybody else. And it's sort of like, part of you, you still want to care and listen to people and still, have your friends and family around you. I'm not saying that, but it sort of becomes like a survival instinct now. It's sort of like, okay, I feel much better now knowing that the ugly truth than to be told, a dark lie, if that makes sense. So it's sort of like, this is the ugly truth of how the world is. It just is what it is. There's no explaining anything about it. You just have to kind of go out and do your own thing and focus on your own mission. I think now that's sort of what you're kind of seeing. It's just, it sucks because if, these people weren't stealing, we wouldn't have these problems. At the end of the day, you still got to, create and do your own thing. And I respect that. I'm not going to sit here and play pity patty forever, but, it is what it is, I guess. I never said no one has come. Well, yeah, I mean, I agree, Seven Crows, that no one's come to save you. Oh, no, I mean, and I think that applies to all of us. I mean, I just think in the reality is that, despite having all these, intangibles and issues, you still have to be, there's still the self-accountability part at the end of the day. But I still believe that this economy is going to collapse. I really do. I think it's on the brink. And I think that, unless there's something that could be done to change it, I think relieving of the taxes would be definitely a good start. Do I think it's the finish? Do I think it's the only thing? No, but I think it's definitely a start. I think if you set the tone right away, I think people told me if you were governor of Texas or whatever, what's the first thing you would do? I said I'd cut property taxes right off the bat. And so by doing that, it kind of sets the tempo. It creates the shock value, because I know how humans are. We react to shock value. This has never been done before. Ooh, what's this guy going to do next? So it sets the tempo. Does that make sense? It sets the tempo right away. And it gets the conversation rolling. And I think that, I set the bar right away. So that the guy who comes in after me is going to have to do a lot better. Right? Now, I think that's how it set the tone right away. I said, day one, I cut property taxes. Absolutely, in the state of Texas. And there's, of course, some other things that I would do. But that's just the first thing. That's just the first thing that comes to mind. And I set the tempo right away. The old basketball, football analogy. Setting the tempo. Something like that. Somewhat raining, but not raining this much. But yeah, I appreciate you guys for taking the time to watch my videos. I'm gonna go ahead and head out of here. I did 1 hour and 3 minutes for y'all, and I appreciate y'all taking the time to watch. I'll probably do another video later. It may not be today. It'll probably be most likely tomorrow. I'm thinking. So, yeah, probably tomorrow. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and go home and watch some movies. I got some movies that I'm gonna go watch. I got this badass World War II movie I've been watching. It's called Uprising with Donald Sutherland. Pretty damn good. But yeah, I'm gonna watch the movie, and I'm gonna holler at y'all later. Y'all take care, man.